Hey guys, quick video here on how to transplant. Sorry, baby girl. Alright, my videos are pretty well low production value, okay? So, thanks for watching and bearing with me. What I've got to transplant today is this dwarf banana. It's pretty simple, but I just want to run through some basics real quick. When you transplant something into a container, it's the exact opposite of when you transplant it from a container into the ground. When we transplant from a container into the ground, we like to dig a bigger than necessary hole and then fill in with some compost and soil amendments. 2 to 3 times the size that this actually would need. And what that does is allow the plant good loose soil to spread its new root growth into. But when we're transplanting from one container into another container, we want to make sure that that size of the next container isn't too big. The reason being is the soil in containers is more likely to stay wet. It takes longer for soil container typically to dry out unless it's mixed really well. So I just did a little how to mix potting soil, container soil, so you can check that out. But when you're mixing your potting soil, make sure to add plenty of sand. Not too much. I mean, you don't want what would be considered a cactus mix. But at the same time, you want something that's going to be airy and well drained. It's pretty much self-explanatory, but once you get into it, if you're totally new to planting and growing things, I think the best way to describe it would be a sponge. A really, really big, fat, wet, soaked sponge with a bunch of little dry sponges inserted in and around it. And what those sponges, the little dry sponges, do is it wicks away the moisture from the bigger sponge and allows air down in there to dry it out even more. And that's what the sand does. Alright, so anyways, again, you want your soil to be very well draining and airy, and you want your container that you're moving up to not be too big, too much bigger. The general recommendation is about 1 inch to 2 inches on each side, all around the old pot. So you can take your new pot, set your old pot down in there, basically as long as you got about 1 inch or 2 around the old pot. That's about as big as you want to go. The reason being is if you have too much soil in there, it's not going to dry out and it's just going to hold in a bunch of moisture. And these roots, though they like moisture, they definitely need that dry off. I call it a dry off, or else their roots will rot. So what I like to do starting off here, I typically save my containers. As you can see, this is a well-used container. The reason this banana tree is going into a container is it's eventually going to be going into a greenhouse, but I'm not ready to put it in there yet, so we're just going to move it up from one container to the next. Typically, like I said, I reuse my containers, but I really want to be ginger with this and careful with this, so I'm just going to use a sharp knife here to cut down the sides and, you know, free the container from the roots. And guys, like I said, everyone's new. Everyone starts somewhere. So if you're new to this, don't be intimidated. You know, thank God for YouTube, books, online forums. Check it out, man. You will learn so much. I've been gardening my whole life, but containers, they're new to me, you know. Until last year, I was really making a lot of simple mistakes. Sorry about that. I was making a lot of simple mistakes that I didn't understand. And again, what you do for a container that's just out for the summer season is considerably different than what you do for a container that's going to be in the house all year round. All right. So once we have this pretty well separated, guys, there's a lot of plants that you're going to want to mess with the roots. Okay, you're going to want to make them so that they're spreading. I'm not going to do that to this. I'm going to look for some tips, some root tips that I can loosen a little bit. But you can see I broke that root. But I don't like I just did. I don't want to break them too much. You can see this root mass is very wet. Okay, I'm gonna try to. I think you can see that on the profile. I'm just loosening up a few root tips so that when I place it down here, they're gonna be free to spread. There are some plants, guys, I would be tearing into right now. You know, the roots. But this, not so much. Just gonna lay it in there. Gonna center it up. I already have my potting mix prepped. So try to make this a quick and easy video. All I'm gonna do is pour it in here. Also, I should let you know, I already actually had the base of the potting mix placed. So there was already, and that's very important actually, I'm sorry, the drainage at the bottom of your pot. It's very important. Some people will use gravel. I use gravel. Some will just use an extra sandier mix, a potting mix at the base. But yeah, that's very important. And before I got started with the video, I had already put in about this much drainage. All I did was I took this plant, I put it down into this pot, and saw how much height difference there was, and I filled in the bottom of the pot with the difference. So this sank about 2 inches below the rim of the new pot. I want it down about an inch, so I took the difference between the 2 inches and the inch lip that I want to maintain, and I put an inch or so of drainage soil down in the bottom. Anyways, I love my rambling. Guys, that's pretty much it. You're gonna get this soil in here, spread it around. And understand that most of this soil that is going to sit up on top for right now, most of this stuff is going to settle down in the edges. I don't want to pack it in there. I'll let the water do that. But the best thing to do, and this is a little side note that I should have mentioned before, being new at these videos, it's probably doing a lot of that wrong too. But one thing I want to add before I finish up here is, it's oftentimes easier to do your transplants with dry soil. And let me specify when I say dry soil. The soil that you're, the plant that you're transplanting should be pretty well dry. The soil that it's planted in. The reason being is the ball of soil that it's in will hold together better. It's easier on the roots. There's less weight on them when you're lifting it and maneuvering it around. And it's just so much easier to do. Now again, that's the reason I'm not watering this in right now. is because this plant was soaking wet, to the point that the roots, when I pulled it out just now and was showing you how to separate some of the roots and loosen them up, I was seeing some considerable amount of root rot at the bottom. So I'll water this in, and probably tomorrow or the next day. But again, let me just recap. Keep your soil for containers on the sandier side, especially for tropicals and things like that. When you're upgrading to the next size pot, just go about, now there are different pot sizes, okay? So you got your 8-inch to your 10-inch to your 12-inch, that kind of thing. If you're using that reference, every 2 inches, so if you've got an 8-inch pot and it's an 8-inch pot, go up to a 10. Stay away from a 12. And that's it. When you go to start by putting your drainage down at the bottom of the pot. Pre-measure by using your old plant or your old container, putting it down into the new container to see the height difference and the depth difference, and then depending on how high you want the lip above the soil is how much bottom drainage you're going to give yourself. Put that in before you get started with pulling this plant out, and then setting that plant down on top of that bottom layer, and then filling in around it. Some will use scoops. That would be easy. I just went ahead and did the redneck way, and I dumped it in with a bucket. Anyways, guys, I appreciate you watching. Be sure to like. Feel free to comment. Again, I love comments. Good feedback. So it teaches us all. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.